Welcome to the lesson on vertical integration. The lesson starts with a comment from Dilbert, my main source of business education. Dilbert says, "We found a dozen bugs in the software you sold us to a vendor." The vendor says, "We can fix these bugs for $20,000. "What?" exclaims Dilbert. "You can't charge us to fix your own defects." To which the vendor exclaims, "Mwahahaha! Sorry, I was overcome by an evil euphoria." Dilbert says, "I guess we have to pay. We have no choice." And the vendor says, "Excuse me," and calls, "Put more bugs in the software. I'm making a fortune out here." And Dilbert begins to question his single source strategy. I include this cartoon because it illustrates well the holdup problem, which we'll see later in the lesson is a primary concern when deciding whether or not to build something or to buy something. Do you make it or do you purchase it? Do you integrate vertically or do you purchase inputs from an outside supplier? The goal of this lesson is to identify when a firm's optimal choice is to buy an input and when the best choice is to make the input. We have 4 main points. The first is a discussion of the boundary between activities and inputs in the firm and activities and inputs that are outside the firm. Ronald Coase wrote a famous paper that identifies well the boundary between things that are in the firm and things that are not in the firm. So we're going to talk first about the boundary between, first we're going to talk about what is the boundary of a firm. This raises the question, why does a firm emerge at all in a specialized exchange economy? Here's a quote from Ronald Coase. "The main reason that it is profitable to establish a firm would seem to be that there is a cost to using the price mechanism. The boundary of a firm ends when it uses prices and contracts." Oh, we skipped that. How can firms acquire inputs? Firms acquire inputs 3 ways: on the spot market, through long-term contracts, and through vertical integration. The last question we talk about is, what is the optimal way to acquire inputs? The optimal way to acquire inputs depends on the extent to which a relationship between the buyer and seller requires specialized investments and the cost of writing ongoing or long-term contracts. So we're going to explore how specialized investments and contract cost affect whether firms should acquire inputs on the spot market, through long-term contract, or should build it themselves. At the end of this lesson, the successful student can identify conditions conducive to using spot markets, longer-term contracts, and vertical integration to obtain inputs. We have 2 main takeaways. First, choose the method of acquiring inputs that minimizes the cost of acquiring them. And second, beware of relationship-specific investments, switching cost, and being locked into a supplier or buyer.